Welcome back to Smart Life. I'm Dr. Gina, and we all know that we must deal differently with men than we do with women in the workplace. But most of us are just trying to wing it. One man who can give us a few tips on handling the different genders in the workplace is business coach Greg Clowminzer. Greg, welcome to the show. Glad to have you in studio with us. Some of us do find it difficult handling men and women and the differences in the workplace. What's the first thing you tell people that they need to recognize in terms of gender differences in the workplace?
I think it's, I mean, it's obvious, but we're different. We're completely different. We're wired different. We're built different. And I think the biggest thing in all relationships is really understanding the opposite sex and stop trying to get them to be like me and me to be like them, but to really understand their differences and cooperate. I know the show is about the battle of the sexes, but I think we actually need to learn how to cooperate.
Yeah,
and
well,
work in
that leads me to a great point. What is the #1 complaint, let's say, let's just start with male bosses about their female employees?
I think a lot of times just lack of communication. They feel like they have
Men
to
complain about lack of communication?
Yeah. In terms of keeping them posted on what they're doing and updating. Now, now they'll never tell them. That's the problem. They tell me as their coach.
Oh, but the men aren't telling the...
Yeah, they're not telling them. They're not communicating to their staff what they need. And so they're frustrated, okay? And then the women are not getting any feedback. And so they just think they're doing their job and they think they're doing a great job. And their biggest frustration is they're not getting acknowledged for the good work that they are doing.
Okay.
So it's a complete communication breakdown.
Okay.
The men are not communicating what they need from them, more of them, and the women are not being acknowledged from the men, the good work that they're doing and acknowledging them.
So there are 4 ways this can break down in the workplace. You've got a male superior with a female inferior employee. You've got female with the male. You've also got men managing men and women managing women.
Right.
Which is the worst?
I think it's women and women.
I was going to say, I was going
Unfortunately,
to let you be the one to say that.
Yeah.
Okay, and why is that?
Gosh, that's the million-dollar question. That's the million-dollar question. I mean, inherently, and you know, I'm always really politically correct, and I try not to really get out there.
Oh,
but,
you don't have to be on this show.
Okay, great.
We do everything we can not to be politically correct.
You know, women are, they're competitive at their very nature, at their very core. I don't know what it is, their hardwiring or whatever, to really to be protected and to find a man to protect them or whatever, like, you know, back in caveman style or whatever. And so I think it's just like hardwiring, there's that survival, that competitiveness.
It kind of plays itself out. So if there's 2 women working in the workplace, they're going to compete just because they have that hardwiring.
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
Interesting. That is interesting because I have noticed that women in the workplace, you know, we have no problems here. Let me just get that out of the way. But and it's true. But I have noticed that it seems like most of the drama that takes place in the workplace, at least in my experience, has happened between the women, with the men kind of going, you know, kind of wanting to almost bow out, right?
Right. So women are in that survival mode, and really the solution is to get women to appreciate and respect other women.
And especially in the workplace, you can think that, like, if you are a female boss, for example, and somebody who works for you is doing a great job, instead of perceiving that as competition, I've never understood why women can't just think in terms of, okay, I take personal pride in this, my employee who's doing really well. What is it in women that they can't seem to go there sometimes?
Got it. Well, there's another dynamic too, in that above that female-female coworker relationship, typically the boss above that is a male.
Yeah.
And so what happens is that the person who's in more of a leadership role, the woman, and with her coworkers, she's really terrified of letting down her boss. And so, you know, the breakdown is that people just get into survival mode. They're not being authentic. They're not being open. They're not communicating. And it's all fear-based. It's a fear-based work environment, and that's the problem.
Yeah, that is really a problem.
You know, particularly in our economy right now, people don't want to lose their job. They're very threatened.
So there's even more competition.
There's a huge compromise of the individual, you know, and their own integrity, if you will.
Interesting. Now, for men who are working for women, what tip would you give them? How can they please that woman boss who's so different and might seem utterly foreign to them? Got it.
So let me back up and say that the way to bring out the best in a man from a woman management style is to never criticize him.
Never?
Okay? Never criticize
Are
him.
you kidding me?
Yeah, I know. It's like foreign. It's completely
Fail.
foreign.
Yeah, no, that is foreign.
Now, a male boss to a male counterpart can challenge him and critique him, and the man will rise to that occasion. But the feminine manager or the woman manager, it's counterproductive.
Oh, come on now.
Yeah.
Well, now, how are we supposed to deal with that? What about when he does something completely wrong?
Yeah. Well, you have to be more graceful in your communication. You've got to acknowledge him for what he's doing well, and you've got to really champion him. And what I would say is woo him into greatness rather than to criticize him. Men will rise to the occasion if they think that they're going to please you, by wooing them and doing their best work. But if you criticize them, they'll just shrink down and collapse. Now, the other thing is really important, men managing women. What is the best leadership style? How do you get the best out of women? And as a male manager and leader, you must praise. Praise, praise, praise. What every woman wants is acknowledgement, praise, to be told they're doing a good job. The more you tell them that, the more they'll work harder for you, they'll do more, they'll be your advocate.
That sounds right.
They'll watch your back.
That's interesting because you bring up the topic of loyalty. Is it harder, that relationship, a man working for a woman or a woman working for a man, which of those is harder to breed that employee loyalty that every manager wants in a company?
I'm not sure. I think that you could perhaps build that loyalty, the male boss with the woman. The only thing is, at the first moment of scorn or disappointment, all hell breaks loose.
You're going to deflate them. Yeah.
And so building that confidence and trust with another man, I think, may weather a storm of an upset greater than the scorn or the disappointment or the feeling of betrayal of a female employee.
So it sounds like all in all what you're saying, I'm just gonna shake this all down and say it sounds to me like you're saying that the male and male relationship in the workplace is going to be the easiest. Doesn't mean it's going to be the best, because certainly there are good relationships otherwise, but you're saying the easiest, just from a purely simple standpoint. The women and women are going to compete, the men and women are going to have issues, but the men and men are going to get each other the easiest.
I think you've summarized that.
Interesting. Well, that is.
And I've never even articulated it that way before, but you've summarized it, I think,
well,
very
it's just drawing from what it sounded to me like you said. Okay, so if you were to give just general tips to our audience to say, these are the things that you need to know about women and men, very specifically in terms of, like you mentioned, hardwiring, what would you say? Top number one point for each.
I think that culturally and in business and in leadership we're going through a major change, number one.
Yeah.
Okay? And that I'm a big fan and study of leadership. And one of the things that we're noticing about leadership is we're leaving an authoritarian, more masculine leadership model and role
behind. Yeah.
And so what that's really doing is it's actually inviting men to lead in a different way, but it's also inviting women to lead in a different way. And this new leadership is what I call embracing the masculine and feminine simultaneously. So the greatest leaders are those who can be authentic, but also share selectively their vulnerability with their team and their other people.
Interesting.
Okay.
Sharing vulnerabilities isn't a traditional management tactic, so I'm intrigued.
And that's where we're going, and most people don't even understand that, but that's the wave of consciousness, that's where we're moving in terms of leadership. And so for the feminine or the women going into leadership is they've been told, if we look at leadership has come out of the military and sports, which is all masculine.
All masculine.
Okay? And so women who want to get ahead, that's their model. They don't have any women role models as leaders, okay? So their role models are male and masculine. So they cultivate their masculine and figure, I've got to be drive, I've got to be strong, I can't shed any emotions, and I've really got to pursue. And that's a big mistake. It's a big mistake. And they shut themselves down. And when I work with women business owners and women leaders, what's just killing them on the inside is this feeling like they just can't be vulnerable. Their emotions are so locked up. And they just have to drive. And
especially when you work in a male-dominated industry like I do, it's extra hard. But this is some fascinating information. I am so glad, and I have never heard anyone say before that you have to selectively be authentic in your vulnerabilities. I think that's just great advice, Greg.
And here's a really important thing is if we understand vulnerability, is the key to being connected, increasing our connectivity. So if we want to get...
That's really what we're talking about.
Right,
we're not talking
right.
about making yourself truly vulnerable. We're
Right.
talking about connecting with
Yes,
people.
yes. You had a guest here about relationships. Well, all relationships is vulnerability, cultivates intimacy, cultivates love, cultivates connectedness, and people trust. People will do their best work for you. But if you're not vulnerable, if you're just coming at them and trying to get the most out of them,
it's not gonna work.
you know, you've lost that contact.
Greg, I appreciate it. Greg Clowminzer. If you'd like to call the show, the number is 888-650-8176. Also, you can email your questions by going to the Smart Life page at moneybizlife.com. Click on Ask the Dr. Gina button. Your calls and letters are next right here on Smart Life with Dr. Gina. Stay tuned.